כן, בסדר גמור. Okay, what's that? You have your yes, we're here.
הנה, 60 ריבוס נשמע ישראל.
Okay, so,
Let's change it up a minute.
I mean, you went out or you just are not
You
looking?
just like turn yourself off.
So what did we say so far? We said that on Shvi Pesach, on the 7th day of Pesach, is the birth of the neshamas.
Right.
We started out with the Shlah, right? The Shlah said that He'arim Rakidu, that's Yira. And Ayam Rav, sorry, that's Ahava. And the sea, the Tzoa, Ayam Rav Yanos, so that's Yira. And that Ahava is like the minister before the king, or like the son, as we'll see. And the sea is like a servant who has fear or awe before the neshama. Now he says that he told us that the neshamas are like brothers, meaning they're like ministers. That their connection is one of love. When are they called that? When they're still, as it were, at the level of thought. Meaning, in other words, that it's like Hashem thought of the world and then he spoke the world. So when it's at the level of thought, then it's one with him. So it's called like a minister. That it's in a state of love, sitting with him. When he speaks the world into being, so that's already fear. And that's why speech is malchus, as you'll see. So the same thing happens by souls. Souls, every soul of Hashem is like a thought that Hashem has. And every soul of the Jewish people is a thought that he has. So when it's at the level of thought, it's one with him. It's like a minister. And when it comes into being, that's called its birth. It's like he speaks it into being, but he doesn't speak it, rather he blows it into being, but it's still the same thing, it comes out of the mouth. Then it becomes something like a servant, like it's separate. And now there's Yira, now there's awe. So that's the model, the basic model that he explained from the Shlah. But now he has to supplement this a little bit more. And he said that Hinei Shishim Rivon Nishmot Yisrael Shenimshachim Shishim Rivot Yot HaMachshava Nikreim Achim Lekut Shabrichu. So the 600,000 souls, which come from the 600,000 letters of thought. What are the 600,000 letters of thought? So usually we say, yeah, it's the Torah, but the Torah is not 600,000 letters. So the Torah represents the 600,000 letters. That's the simple meaning. And again, people get hung up on things they shouldn't get hung up on. They look for 600,000 letters in Torah. There's only 300 and something else. 200 something. I don't remember what the number is. 285,000. So why are you getting hung up? What's the problem? Well, it's a symbol. It's not meant to be one-to-one correspondence. If you want to get a one-to-one correspondence, we have all kinds of teretzes, all kinds of excuses. Why there's only 285,000? Again, it's a symbol. So he says, as long as they're in the thought, then they're called the brothers of Hashem. It's like they're ministers. Shehema midot. Okay? Why midot? Because we're talking about the world of emanation. In the world of emanation, even the midos, even the emotional attributes, are like thought, because the whole world of emanation is like thought. So it's like what we call the thought about the midos. Okay? It's like thinking about the emotions. What we talked about before, when you walk into your house, if you knock or don't knock. So the discussion is an intellectual discussion, and it maybe awakens something, doesn't awaken something, but it's not an act. So that's what it means, that you can talk about emotions without, or like you read a novel. There's a lot of talk about emotions, but no actual emotions. Again, the point here is not to get hung up on it being a thought, but what does a thought symbolize? That when a person thinks, that the letters of his thought and the thought itself are one thing, meaning the details in the thought and the thought itself, they're one thing, they're not separated. And when you're thinking of emotions, they're one with the actual emotions that will come out eventually. But they haven't come out yet, so you're only thinking about them. Okay? You haven't actually separated them out.
Why do they come out? Just because you're thinking about it?
They don't come out. When you're thinking about it, they don't come out. There's no separation.
So why should they ever come out? What's the
Because you also have a heart, and eventually the thought trickles down into the heart. So if I think about something long enough, eventually I'll feel it. That's exactly the idea of Shema Yisrael, Ahavta. That you'll contemplate Hashem being one. Eventually you'll come to love Him. Because it trickles down, it goes down. And when it's still in the thought, meaning in the world of emanation, it's still considered to be entirely divine. It's like part of God. Again, as God is enclosed within the world of emanation. God Himself is much more than that. But at least in the sense that God engarbs Himself in the world of emanation, the world of Atzilus, so there the thought and the thing itself are one. The thought about it and the thing itself are one. Kivatzilut, and that's the notion in the Zohar called Iu v'chayoy v'galmoicha, that He, His life, and His vessels are one, or bones. Galmoy is really bones. So He, His life, His bones are one. And what does it stand for? As this was explained elsewhere, he says, I think here they give all kinds of interesting Makomos. Okay. What does it mean? He is God. His life means the light is the power of thought. V'galmoy, and the bones.
You usually translate Gamma as causation.
No, that's gamma, and that's gamma. Sometimes something else. Right? You probably have the same root, but it's different. Even though they're both words in Aramaic. Garmohi is bones. Like we say in Hebrew, perekoto legoromim. So people think he broke him into causes. He broke him into his pieces, into his elemental pieces. So the elemental pieces here are the details. So that if he's thinking of you, then you're a detail in the thought. But in the world of emanation, they're all one. He and the power of thought, and what the thought is thinking about. Again, we're just saying in a different way, that we dealt with last week. Okay, so in the world of emanation, they're all one. So what happens next? But you want them to be a separate creation. You want them to take on a life of their own. You want them to have free will. You want a lot of things to happen. So that the neshama becomes something, a being, and because I wanted to now inform a body and to go through what it goes through in life, liot b'chinat nivra, to be a creation, shu b'chinat nifrad me'ayin mamash, and it has to stop being Okay? The neshama has to take on, as we saw in many places, the changes, the development that the body goes through. It has to be influenced by it, right? The neshama has to be influenced by the life story. If the soul is not influenced, what's the point? You can't think of the soul as just animating the body. That's not enough. Because the soul was sent down for a purpose. So it has to change. If you say purpose, you say change. It's the same thing. Because when it was an emanation in Atzilus, it's one with the divine altogether. So it's in the state of Ayin. There's no change. It doesn't feel any change. כי גם מה שנקרא בשם אותיות מחשבה, הכל לשכך האוזן. What we call the letters of thought, it was a detail in the thought of Hashem. So we say letters, you can't say in a person that the details are the same thing as the power of thought, because in us it's separate. Okay? That's the main thing. The Rambam says, intention, scholastic intention, in the world of the Rambam. The thinker, the thought, and the power of thought are three separate elements that by God, Aristotle, they're all one. So by God, it's all one. But by us, when we say this, the letters of thought is like the details of what I'm thinking about, what I have intent about at this moment. It's separate from my power of thought. By us, it's not the same thing, because I can still have my power of thought and stop thinking about that particular detail. I don't have to keep thinking about it forever. So by us, they're separate. So he says this is only a mashal, right? Because it's l'shakech ozen, it's just to explain to us. So don't think of the detail of the soul being as a detail that God can stop thinking of it. He doesn't stop thinking of it. He's always thinking of it. It's one with him entirely. It's like
stop thinking about it, doesn't exist anymore.
That's another problem. But that's why they say that God is constantly thinking. We talked about this last week. Sechel pa'il, the active thought, as opposed to passive thought. Because Hashem is always activating everything, as it were. Again, this is how he, as the Alter Rebbe explained, this is how he engarbs himself in the world of emanation, in the power of thought. Since everything is one, like the Zohar says, that means that even what he's thinking of is one with him, and it's eternal, doesn't change. But again, it's just a mashal for us, because we don't understand how it could be that they're all one, because in us they're not all one. We can stop thinking of something. We don't have a problem with stopping to think about the details, and we're still less. Okay. So where were we? But like we said, that his thought is not like ours, and it means to say that it's all one by him. Ktiv, so how do you get it to be separate? So how do you take it out of the world emanation? In the world of emanation, the soul is one with Hashem. There's no difference. In the same way that the details of the thought are one with the thinker. There's no difference. So you have to have something new. So how do you make the soul separate? Through the malchus. The malchus is what makes it separate. שהיא הנקראת לבוש, להעלים ולהסתיר עד שיוכל להיות בחינת יש. So Hashem uses malchus, the power of sovereignty, to separate the soul out from his thought. Okay.
Why does it need malchus?
Oh, why? First of all, we have to establish that this is really what he uses. So he's going to bring a pasuk. שהיא הנקראת לבוש, it's called a garment. Again, just as he engarbed himself in thought to get into the world of emanation, so he has to engarb himself in malchus of the world of emanation in order to create separate realities. And those are going to be what we call the separate realities of Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah, creation, formation, and action. And they're also going to be the separate reality of the souls. The souls are also now going to be separated out from the details of his thought. They're no longer going to be just a detail in his thought. They're going to be something independent. So where do we learn this from? Moshe Katuv, Hashem Malach, Geiut Levesh. כי מידת המלוכה היא הלבוש הגורם להיות התהוות היש. By Hashem became king, and through that he wore pride. Okay? So what does that mean? That even the way that he doesn't go into this verse here now, it's not so important, but you can be medayik from the pasuk, from these words, that it creates a separate reality. It's called geut lavish. It's something. How did the sages say this? They said ki en melech belo am. The moment you have kingdom, it creates a people. If you have sovereignty,
Something else.
you always understood the opposite, right? You can't have.
Still there's people, you can't have a king.
Right. But it works in both ways. It's a necessary and sufficient condition. So it works both ways. The moment that you have sovereignty, automatically whatever is around you becomes a servant, becomes
Subservient.
right away. Yeah. In a certain sense, right? The moment, think about it this way: the moment the Rebbe became the Rebbe, everything changed. Until now, everybody was his brother, his friend, and suddenly, in 1 second, poof! Even everybody who was close to him is now like under him. Right away, they feel it. There's suddenly a sense of awe. Why? Because that's how it works. I don't know how to explain it. That's how it works.
It's more like it was Yosef and his brothers. As soon as he became
Innumerable examples.
Hmm?
Whatever strikes your fancy.
Because the Rebbe wasn't exactly friendly with people.
I don't know. But nobody felt it. So maybe it wasn't a big schmoozer.
Maybe care of his son, so there was other couple.
So, but still, it's not the same thing. And what was Queen Elizabeth's name before she became queen?
Betty.
No, that had a worse name. Much more familiar.
They called it Betty. Oh, Lilibet.
Lilibet. Yeah. That's like a little girl's name. You become queen suddenly, what is it, 21, 22, 23, 25. What happened? It's the same person. Kingdom does that. So it creates hierarchy. That's what it does. And it makes them separate. They now become separate from the king. Because he has to have pride. So to have pride here is not that he's just prideful. It's because there suddenly becomes a separation between the king and the subjects. And they'll have awe. Because on 100 of his sons, they're called sons, the king cannot be a king. And that's true within the family. Within the family also, it's very hard to keep thinking that my father is the king. That's why kingdom is always likened to the ocean, to the sea. Why? Everything that's on the dry land, there's also in the ocean. Every type of animal that's here is there. But you can't see them because they're concealed. And that's the exact idea here. It's the same beings. It's exactly the same beings. You're the same person you were before. But now you're far away, you're distant, you're concealed. Meaning you're concealed from the familiarity with the king. It's separate. הים שהוא המלכות מכסה עליהם ביתי תגלו לנבראים והם טובים מהם שאם היו מגלים היה הגשמיות בטל ברוחניות. So when Hashem spoke, Yehi or before he spoke, he thought it. When he thought it, there was already a world. But there wasn't a world. It was the thought itself already. People ask, why does he have to speak? Not enough for him to think, not enough for him to want. And of course it's enough. But then there wouldn't be a separate existence. To make it into a separate existence, he has to speak it. Because speech takes it out. Like we know that the difference between when I have the thought in my head. And after I've said it, is that after I've said it, I have no more control over it. And that will be quoted till the end of time, and it doesn't matter what I think anymore. It doesn't matter, taken out of context also.
1 second. If you do tshuva, that doesn't wipe it off the face of the mat.
No. Try to do tshuva about something that you said 20 years ago, and it's taped on somebody's tape recorder and brings it out the moment you're trying to become the president. Can't do tshuva for it. Doesn't matter if your opinions change. You can say my opinions change. It doesn't matter. You said that.
With Hashem, you can do
We're
tshuva.
not talking about with him. We're talking about Hashem himself. The moment he spoke the world, that's it. It's a world. It's reality. He can do tshuva and decide not to have the world anymore. But the world that he created, that's already in existence. That he can't take back. There it is. That's it. So in any case, he says, Yehi or Yehi Rakia. He said he thought, let there be light, let there be a firmament. That was still in his thought. And now, after he spoke it, it became a reality. So the same thing is true about the soul. That you need the malchus, you need the ocean, which is the seas, which are a symbol for the malchus, for the kingdom, in order to create the neshama is something separate.
Why is the sea?
Again, because the sea is the same beings, just concealed. There's a distance now. Okay? So that's why it's a symbol for this separation. And if we would see Hashem's thought, there would be no gashmis. There would be no separate physical existence. We would feel, meaning if we would feel Hashem's thought permeating here in this room, we wouldn't feel the room anymore as something that we could touch as being separate from us. Everything would become one.
Another thing.
Just as the light of the sun, when it's in the sun, is not anything separate from the sun. It's just sun. You don't call it sunlight. It's just part of the sun. And you can only see it as sunlight when it's here on earth. It's separate from the sun now. The same way, if we would not see the separation between the reality we're experiencing, the physical reality we're experiencing, we wouldn't see the separation between it and God. So right away, we wouldn't feel that it's a separate reality. Right away, we would feel that it's batel, it's nullified to the source. And therefore, you can no longer have the angels and the souls, which are separate creations. Again, what he's saying is that it's like Moshe. Why does Hashem say Moshe twice? Why is it Yaakov, Avram? By Moshe, there's no psik tam. But in all the others, there is a separation. Why? Because you exist above in the thought, and you exist below as separate. By Moshe Rabbeinu, there was no difference between the two. Not because there wasn't any difference. Moshe Rabbeinu was a real human being. But he was exactly the same as he was a thought before Hashem, or in Hashem's mind, and exactly the same as he acted in this world. They were the same, right? Everybody else, there's a distance, there's a discrepancy. There is some deviation. Why? Because nobody's perfect. Because we all make mistakes and so on. By Moshe, even the mistakes, Hashem says, I want them. They're mistakes, but I want them. Okay. רק שהם באהבה, אלא כשאין האלוקות בגילוי בראייה ממש, ואליהם בהסתר, זהו על ידי המלכות. In any case, Malchus gives the separation. כי זה כלל גדול, the big principle is שהמלכות היא הגורמת להיות בחינת יש. The big principle of Kabbalah and Chassidus, the Malchus creates the separate being, the yes. ונקראת לכך אם התתה, מטרונית, האם, הם הבנים, כמו שדבר בספר של בעיונים שנזר. That's why Malchus is sometimes called the lower mother. Why? Because it gives birth, as a word, to separate realities. So when you say, now what he's saying, that the souls, they were born, what does it mean they were born? They came out of the Malchus. And the Malchus is like a mother. When did this happen? On the seventh day of Pesach. Where were they until then? They were in the womb of the mother. Meaning that they weren't anymore in the world of Atzilus. You can't say that they weren't in Atzilus anymore. Because being in Atzilus is like what we say, that the seed comes from the mind. The seed doesn't come from the mind. Even the ancients knew this. They knew it didn't come from the mind. But what they wanted to say is when it's in the state of a seed, the sperm, it's still as if it's a thought in the thinker's mind. It's a detail. It's still a detail. It's not a separate reality yet. When it fertilizes the female and it goes into the womb, so now it already becomes the beginning, the potential of a separate reality. And it has to be in the womb for 7 months or 6 months, depending on again, each animal something different. By humans, the minimum is 7 months. And during those 7 months, it matures and it's ready to be born. And to be born means that now it will become a separate reality unto itself, independent of the Father. And the Father, again, here is the world of emanation, especially the power of thought in the world of emanation. So the neshama, before it was born, was like in pregnancy, it was like in the womb. When we begin to pray for rain on the 8th day of Sukkot, are you missing a page?
No.
Michelle?
No.
Okay. So on the 8th day of Sukkot, we begin to pray for rain. The rain is a symbol for the sperm. The rain is coming and saying it's like Hashem fertilizing the earth. The earth are being the Malchus, being the kingdom. And so when he fertilizes it, the sperm is with his thoughts that now are like separate, they enter into the mother's womb, into the earth's womb. And they stay there for 7 months until the 7th day of Pesach.
Why does 7th day of Pesach from where?
Because the 7th day of Pesach, we said that the water was uncovered. The water being uncovered means that you became separate. It's like the water breaking. We said that was the image we used yesterday. Yeah. It's an image for it. Again, the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of the Exodus from Egypt, is a beautiful story. The people went out and they were chased by their previous captors, and then they came to the sea, and they crossed it, and the captors were drowned. It's a very nice story. It's catchy. Everybody knows it. So, but you don't have to stop there. You don't have to stop thinking that all it is just a story. It's much more than that. That's what we're doing. We're uncovering the layers of symbolism in the story.
Which are hidden by the water.
The murky waters of our thought. But hidden by the water in the sense that when you think it's just a story, you only see the external events. You don't understand what they mean. The whole of Pnimius Torah is exactly that. It's uncovering the context. What does this actually mean? Meaning what we talked about on the way. You don't understand what you're reading until you understand it. So you have to come with a whole vocabulary of what does the ocean mean? What's its symbol? What does it mean? What does water mean? What does the 7th day mean? And so on. All these things have some meaning. And so the 7th day of Pesach is the time of birth of the neshama. Really, how would we say this? We would say that by nature, if you're living in the northern hemisphere, and everybody, 90% of humanity lives in the northern hemisphere, during the winter months, you go into hibernation. Everybody does. Even if you don't do it physically, because today you have cars and you travel around in heated vehicles and you have heated houses and you continue to work and you have internet and you work from home, whatever it is. The winter months are call it, in the past, people would just, they would go indoors. There wouldn't be any real actions going on. You didn't build the world during the winter months. So you were in the state of like being in the womb. And people were thinking a lot. They say they were thinking. They're making all their plans for what they would do the moment spring started. That's how the world works. Now today, it's still the same, just at a more spiritual level. You can go about and keep doing physical things. But really, the time of itchatshut, the time of renewal, is still the spring. Meaning spiritually, this is when new things start. Even if physically they could go on throughout the year. But this is the time of year when you have new thoughts, when the new neshama comes in. This ties into what we learned in the first half of the week. That now is the time to take everything that you built and use a new thought in order to raise it to a new level. Everything that I constructed during the past year on Pesach, I have the ability to take it to the next level. I can eat what I ate, and I can re-eat it. I can reconsume it. על דרך משל בגשמיות, שלהיות התהוות מהות ולד מן הטיפה, צריך להיות עיכוב אישור 7 חודשים ברכב הנוקבה. And again, the mashal here is a parable, is of course to the creation of a fetus that takes 7 months. שבמשך זמן זה על ידי שאוכל ושותה מה שאימו אוכל ושותה, ונמשך בו חיות עד שעושה לו להיות יש. ככה נשמע את האצילות של בחינת עין, בכדי שתביא להיות בחינת יש, ועל ידי שתתעכב דרך מנוק והשואה שם 7 חודשים, אוכל ושותה שנמשך שם אורות עליונים. So the 6 months, 7 months of the winter, you're eating and consuming everything from the mother, everything from the mother's womb. And that means it's like you're still thinking, you're still in the world of emanation, but you're already on the way out. You're already thinking about where's this all going to go. And then, that's when the souls are born, on the 7th day of Pesach. That's why Sudas Mashiach is on the 7th day of Pesach. Because what is Mashiach? Mashiach is, now we can create everything we thought of. Now we can bring it into being. We can over la'asiyata. It's to enact it. We thought so much. Now let's enact it. Let's make it into a reality. והעניין, כי בכדי שיהיה בחינת לידה ופתיחת הרחם, להיות הנשמה יוצאת מן ההיעלם לגילוי, צריך להיות המשכה והרע במידת המלכות מלמעלה מהשתלשלות. So in order even for the soul to come out from the womb, there has to be an opening. Opening of what? Opening of the womb. What is it? What is it called? Opening is like Gilu. It's a revelation. Now it's not yet born. It's just an opening of the womb. And we're talking about the fact that in emanation, there's Helem V'Gilui. When you're talking about the world of no change, of everything really being just God. So what are the changes? They're not changes. It's just, now I'm showing you this part, now I'm showing you that part. It's like I have a big painting, and the painting is, let's say, of a battle. There's no change. Painting is frozen. But now I show you this part, and I show you that part. Or like we said with the film, the way it used to be. You have a lot of different pictures. They're all static, none of them, but by moving them, it looks like it's alive. So now this picture is in front of the light. It's in front of the projector. That's called opening the womb. It's not yet the birth, because the birth is going to make it into a separate entity. Meaning I'm going to take that picture and suddenly everything that was static on this picture is suddenly going to come to life. It's going to be independent. וזהו מה שכתוב, ויולך השם את הים ברוח קדים עזה. Now this is amazing. It says that before Hashem, how did Hashem tear the sea apart? How did he?
Strong eastern.
He brought a strong eastern wind. So you can read it as eastern, or you can read it as kadim, meaning earlier, or preceding.
Mm-hmm.
He brought a wind that's from something preceding. Now he gets into the Rambam. That's what I told you on the way. That when I read this, I suddenly realized I hadn't understood the Rambam until now. I didn't understand what the Rambam was saying. כי על פי השתלשלות משכל למידות עד ממחשבה לדיבור, אי אפשר להיות המשכה מבחינת העין ובחינת היש, אלא על ידי גילוי הערת הסובב שמקיף לעבייה. שכולם שווים. It says like this. Now we need some background. We gave some of the background yesterday. The background says that in the ancient world, there was a picture of reality where there are 4 levels: earth, wind, earth, water, air, and fire. And these are permanent. They don't change. And we said it's a tremendous novelty that needed to be explained. How is it that there are parts of the earth that are not covered by water? In the world of Kabbalah, these are not called just earth, water, air, and fire. They're also called worlds. So the world of earth is like the world of action. The world of water is like the world of formation. The world of air, of creation, and the world of fire is the world of emanation. And it's a good parallel. It's one example that Kabbalah comes and takes what the sages adopted, and it gives it its own language. It gives it its own language. Where do the sages take this from? They take it from the Greeks. The Greeks invented this four-element theory. The strange thing is, why in the world would it be concentric circles? I didn't get that. That flies in the face. I understood it when I learned it just now. It flies in the face of the regular theory of creation. Because what's the regular Greek theory of creation? What's the theory of creation that the Rambam adopts, that sages seem to adopt? How does it work? It's called ishtalshlut. One thing leads to another. It's causation. But these things don't cause each other. It's not that the air...
There's no connection.
There's no connection between them. The Man Hashem, what's the connection? There is no connection between them. Right? Did you ever think of it? There are two competing theories set up in the Rambam. One says Hashem is the first mover. He's the one who causes everything. And he gives the whole thing about his thinking and his this and that. Pseudo. Let's say I accept it. What's the other theory? Where did this come from? How did the world suddenly become these
Four
separate entities? And by the way, there's not four of them. I read the Rambam again this morning, and I didn't remember what the number was. But when I saw it, it became very clear. Let me just read the relevant section. Everything that God created is divided into three parts, or three types. Things that have both substance and form. Things that have substance and form, they fall under the law of entropy. They come into being and they leave being. ומהם ברואים שהם מחוברים מגולם וצורה, אבל אינם משתנים מגוף לגוף ומצורה לצורה כמו הראשונים, אלא צורתם קבועה בגולמם לעולם, ואינם משתנים כמו אלו, והם הגלגלים והכוכבים שבהם, ואין גולמם כשאר גלמים, ולא צורתם כשאר צורות. And then he says, but there's other things that are substance and form, and they don't fall under the law of entropy. They don't change. They're always the same. So right away, he set us up. He's saying there's two different categories, and so you need two different theories for each, for how they work. What you call causation, that's about the things that go through change. What do things go through change? The Bria Yitzir Asiyah. He's talking about the world of change, what we call Etzem V'Pashtut, right? What we call the world that we experience, where things are changing constantly. But there's also a world of no change. That's what we call the world of Atilus. That's what we call, and what's in the world of Atilus? That everything there is constant. There's no change. It's hell and begilui. It's just revelation and concealment. That's all. It's like the picture, right? It's a different type altogether. Then there's a third type. מהם רואים צורה בלא גולם כלל והם המלאכים. שהמלאכים אינם גוף וגביעה לצורות נפרדות ומזו. And then you have the angels, and the angels, they have no substance. They're only form. So now you need two different theories. You need a theory for things changing, and you need a theory for things that don't change. So the things that don't change are what? How many are there? So at first I thought I don't know how many, You have to read on. He says, how many? He says, Agalgalim. How many? The Galgalim and the four elements. So Galgalim, he says, Kol Galgalim, they're concentric. And he says, how many are there? He says, where is it?
8, 9.
That's what I thought, 9. What does it say? מספר כל הגלגלים המקיפים את כל העולם, 18. There's 18.
What should we come?
Wait.
No, we're going to find time tomorrow morning because these guys wait with me. And,
Just hear the end.
okay,
How many more elements are there?
which one is this?
4,
Yeah,
right?
18, the 4 is 22.
22. What did the Rambam come up with? Exactly the 22 levels that correspond to the 22 letters of the alphabet. He doesn't mention it here, but that's what he's saying. And that's exactly what we have in Chassidus. There's 22 levels. They're called ishtalshlus. They're called seder ishtalshlus, but they're not really ishtalshlus. That requires a separate thing. In the seder, there are 22 stages.
Okay.
So there's a lot more to be done here. And we'll see in a second what he meant. And tomorrow we'll see what he meant that for there to be birth, there has to be a revelation of the higher level. And here he's talking about the Galgalim. He's talking about these forms. Okay.
Listen, will you call me tomorrow?
Yeah.
And see what's going on because I got to do listen our sleep, or the show, dummy, and do circus comics and do. And you let
Bunch of stuff.
Yeah, call. When are you going to call me? About 9:30?